So what is your name?
My name is Lindsay Batoryk.
And what do you do?
I am a full-time nutrition coach.
So how long have you been a nutritionist for, and why did you decide to get into it?
So I'll have been a nutrition coach for 3 years this month, and basically the reason I got into it is over the past, I'd say 10 years, I've had different types of nutrition coaches, whether it's been for bodybuilding, powerlifting, or just sort of body composition in the gym. And I felt that there was an area in nutrition coaching that was missing, so I went through my qualification and decided to give it a shot myself.
So what do you do on a day-to-day basis? What does your job include?
So on a day-to-day basis, you know, first and foremost, I am a coach to predominantly strength athletes, but I do have some, I hate the term, but lifestyle clients as well. But a huge percentage of my job is also content creation for social media as well, because obviously that's where I generate new clients. But day to day, I have 2 days a week where I will go through client check-ins, where my clients will message me with an overview of their week and progress that's being made. Any days where I'm not doing check-ins will be reviewing client meal plans and writing up new plans for clients.
So you talk about the meal plans.
Mm-hmm.
What is the process of writing a meal plan for someone that doesn't know?
Okay, so with any new client that signs up with me, they will be sent what's called a client assessment form, and that is every piece of information that you can imagine for me to be able to write a meal plan for that person. So it's their age, weight, height, their current activity level, what their occupation is, average steps per day, things like that. But then also what their goals are, what has stopped them from achieving their goals in their past, how confident do they believe they are in achieving their goals this time, food likes, dislikes, any surgeries, injuries, allergies, things like that. Just everything you can imagine to paint a picture of that person to allow me to write the most sort of bespoke, if you like, nutrition plan for them.
How have you found it? Have you found it, so is it challenging, or does it just depend on person to person?
Person to person, you know, it is the statement one size does not fit all absolutely applies here. Everyone is entirely different. I think the most surprising thing that I've found with this as time has gone on is I would say that the majority of my conversations with my clients isn't actually related to nutrition. It's more around mental health, what's going on in their life at the moment, because all of those impact their progress. So it's not as easy as the food that you eat, it's stress, finances, your relationships, things like that. So I would say the most surprising and most has been that the percentage is more like 30% nutrition conversations, 70% sort of mental health and emotional stuff.
So you talk about like mental health, how does it affect you? Does it affect yours in like any way? Are you like...
It's an interesting question because it absolutely has affected me quite significantly in the past, where I've had to take stock of how involved I get with my clients in terms of how deep I go into these conversations. Using one specific example, one of my clients had told me that she was going to attempt suicide, and I lost sort of 24 hours of my life trying to talk her around because she had no family and no support network. So I'd put her in touch with a clinical psychologist and things like that. And I ended up taking a week off entirely because it was so emotionally draining. So yeah, it does sort of suck you in without you realising, but I also promote that as part of my coaching, that I want people to feel comfortable opening up. So it's a difficult balance for sure.
Have you ever, like, not, you say you've been involved a lot, have you ever not been as involved? Like with a client, have you like, sort of, after that, taking that week off, did you find yourself sort of not being involved as much?
I think I tried to do that, to try and step back a bit, but it's difficult because I've been doing this for 3 years now, and all I do is talk to people. And whilst people are different, there are patterns in people's behaviour. So for me to understand why somebody is giving into their cravings, for example, or overeating, undereating, I need to understand what's happening emotionally for them to do that. So as much as I like to think I take a step back, no, I would say I'm probably still just as involved in people's lives as I was before.
So back to the meal plans. What are the challenges you face when writing it?
Again, everybody is completely different. Within the client assessment form, I ask people what are your food likes and dislikes, because I don't follow a meal plan process where, if you're familiar with the term, if it fits your macros. So I don't just provide macros to people and they choose what food they want. I write meal plans telling people what to eat, for want of a better term. So you get some people that like all food, have no food dislikes, have no allergies or intolerances, and that's very easy. The challenges come when people have certain intolerances or allergies, or, you know, vegan, vegetarian. You know, there's the challenge of making sure that people are getting enough protein in then. So it really is, it differs person to person, what they do for a living, if they work night shifts, if they don't have access to microwaves, all these sorts of things. It really does vary person to person.
So have there been any scenarios where you've had to like make sacrifices for a certain client, or?
What do you mean when you say sacrifices?
Like, is there something that you could have done? So like, for example, so sacrifices is like, is there something you could have done instead of? So, say, talking back to that person that struggled, is there something else you could have been doing where, say, for your own benefit rather than helping them?
I think not allowing myself to get involved, using that specific scenario, not getting involved as much as I did would have benefited me. And in hindsight, that's what I should have done, because it's very, very difficult with something like that, because she's obviously told me that she had no support network, but that had such a huge impact on me mentally for quite a long time. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have got involved to the lengths that I did.
So let's go on to like specifically powerlifters now.
Yep.
How difficult are they to deal with?
I can say this because I am a powerlifter, so, you know, I'm a competitive powerlifter as well, so I understand what these people are like. The one thing that I say to most of my powerlifters, or strength athletes in general, because I coach strong men and strong women and things like that as well, is this sport does not pay your bills. I think that is what people need to remember, that we choose to do this because we enjoy feeling strong and getting stronger. Some people like competing, some people don't, but this doesn't pay our bills, and it will never pay our bills. There is no money in powerlifting. But I think the thing for me is, it isn't that difficult if you do the basics. If you fuel yourself correctly, if you warm up correctly, if you follow your training program correctly, you will progress. But people cannot do that. That people will stray from their nutrition, stray from their training program. To give an example, what I hear more often than not is, I was supposed to go into the gym and lift this weight. I lifted more because I felt strong on that day. That's not the way it works, and that sort of thing hinders your progress. So powerlifters are a challenge because they want to be strong. They feel that they know how to get stronger quicker, and unfortunately it's a process you've got to go through, and you know, you need to commit to how long it takes to get to the end result.
How often are you in contact with them? Is it, so you say, so when do you check in with your clients?
So my clients can check in on either a Monday or a Friday. It's completely up to them. As long as they check in on either one of those days, I'm happy. So I will speak to them at least once a week. I would say 50% of them I speak to more than once a week, for sure. And then others are they will follow the meal plan, check in, I'll speak to them next check-in day, and they just tick the boxes. So yeah, it does, again, vary person to person.
So you say you speak to them more than once. Is that just on the Mondays and Fridays, or is it every single day?
Every single day, morning, evening, whatever it is. Yeah, it completely varies.
So is it common for them to be like, they think they can lift heavier, they want to change what they eat? Is it common for them to request certain foods?
They will. It's funny because I give, I believe, a lot of variety in my meal plans to allow people to be creative with their meals, because I don't work with bodybuilders specifically, because I've done that, because I've been a bodybuilder and lived that restrictive eating life. I try and give as much creativity as possible and as much freedom as possible. The things that people tend to ask for change shows more of a lack of knowledge than anything else. So I'll give an example of one that happened yesterday. For one of my powerlifters, he messaged me and said, can I substitute my pre-workout jam and bagel to have guac and sour cream with my lunch? And I said, no, because the pre-workout meal is very specific. That's sugary carbs for you to utilise in your training session. So we can get those things fitted into your meal plan, but you can't substitute your pre-workout meal for something like that. So it does happen quite frequently that people are asking for changes.
So you talk about, like, so is there certain foods that powerlifters sort of have to avoid if they want to reach their goals?
It's the same for powerlifters as I would say it is for people in general, to be honest. There is no magic food for people to eat. You know, the most important things are obviously high protein, because we want to grow muscle, repair muscle, retain muscle. So protein is hugely important. Protein's also important for making you feel full for longer. You know, people tend to think that carbs are the way to go, but protein will keep you fuller for longer. Carbs are obviously hugely important for powerlifters, for that glycogen, for that energy in the gym to be able to want to. In terms of food to avoid, I prefer people to avoid too much sugar, ultra-processed foods, you know, because you have no control over what is in those foods. They're not great, they're not filling, the nutrients within them aren't great. So that's sort of where I'd say people need to focus.
So how does your job, I think we've sort of touched on it a little bit, but I want to go into this in more detail. Mm-hmm. How does your job change from client to client?
Again, it depends on the person. Some are, you know, I have some focusing on powerlifters. I have some powerlifters. I have one chap in particular that comes to mind. He's been with me about a year now. I never speak to him outside check-in days. He only talks to me on check-in day. He follows the meal plan every single week. There is no issue with this guy, and he is, you know, not a shock, progressing all of the time. His lifts are getting better all of the time. His body composition is better all of the time, because he's doing what he's paying me to tell him to do. But then you will have other clients that have the best intentions but cannot stop snacking, or are constantly scrolling on their mobile phones, so their sleep is terrible, which impacts their training and things like that. So my job changes genuinely every single day, because you're dealing with people and people are unpredictable.
Does your job do you ever get like bored of your job, or do you, because it's so different, are you always like looking forward to the check-in days? Or
I think it's very difficult to get bored when you're working with people, and because I've really promoted with my business people opening up and talking about what's going on in their lives, there's always something happening. It's very difficult, I would say, to get bored of it, for sure.
So you talk about this, you also do content creator thing. How does that sort of like work, and what do you sort of do?
So at the moment, my focus is specifically on, well, I'll sort of go back. When I first started Titan Nutrition, I hadn't completed my qualification, so I wasn't coaching anybody, but my post was about my learning journey and things I was learning through my qualification. Because I was putting content out daily, obviously that generates a lot of interest, so I had a lot of people messaging and asking if I was taking on clients yet. Then I'd got the qualification and you continue to create content. I found that the majority of the content that I create now comes from questions that clients ask me in check-ins. So I have some clients that are on ADHD medication. So a question they'll ask me is, how do I deal with the fact that this medication makes me lose my appetite, but I need to eat because I need to train? So it's things like that. Any questions that I get from my clients, that's what inspires the content that I put out now.
So, how much have you learned from that back in that 3 years ago, where you've not got the qualification yet, but you've got sort of clients waiting, to now?
Yeah, I've learned a lot, and I say it over and over on my social media, I am not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Any coach that professes to be is wrong. I've learned a lot about myself, I've learned a lot about the people that I work with and the people that I enjoy working with. And I just continually learn, nutrition is so big and science is changing all of the time, so my learning never really stops in this. And I think that's why I enjoy it so much, because it's constantly evolving.
So, a week before a comp,
yeah,
or days before a comp, are there any changes you make to certain meal plans?
Yeah. So talking about powerlifters and assuming that it's a weight category federation, my big thing is compete in the weight category that you naturally sit in. That's my preference. So to give an example, I naturally sit at 77 kilos. I compete in the 82.5s because I don't want to cut weight to 75. I want to feel strong, so I'll do the 82.5s. If somebody doesn't want to do that because they're chasing records and things like that, so they need to fit into a weight category, that's where the weekly check-ins come in, because I can monitor their weight as we get closer and closer to competition. So it's not a shock for us as such when we get a week before the comp, because I've seen what their weight has been like for weeks prior to that. If, for example, they are overweight a week out, if they are over their weight category a week out, there are a few things that we can look at, predominantly a water cut. That is where we would move into a water cut that would start 7 days out from competition.
And for people that don't know, what is a water cut?
So a water cut, I'm not a huge fan of them. They're just a tool that coaches have available to them. So a water cut is, there will be a period of water loading for a few days. So that would start at 7 days out. There would be a few days of water loading, and then you would go through a process of water cutting. So it's basically tricking your body to continually flush water out. So at the point that you come to weigh in, you're completely depleted. So it's things like taking out sodium a day before, again, because this continues to flush water out to allow people to make weight.
So what happens if a week before they're overweight? The water cut?
Yeah, the water cut. So if they're overweight a week out, again, this is something that we will agree well in advance that they're happy to go through a water cut, because some people aren't. They are exceptionally dangerous if not done right. But yeah, 7 days out, that's when we would start the water cut. So there is a protocol for that week, and then there is a rehydration and refueling protocol immediately after weigh-in as well.
What happens, this might sound a simple question, but what is the process if the athlete is underweight, like a couple of days before?
If they're underweight, my thing is, again, if it's a weight category sport, so powerlifters or anyone, if it's a weight category sport, I like people to sit as close to the top end of that weight category as possible. So if it's an 82.5 kilo lifter, I would like them going into weigh-in at 82 kilos, because the heavier you are, the stronger you are, you know, the fuller you are, all of that sort of stuff. If they're significantly underweight a couple of weeks, a week out, we will increase calories, but you've got to be very careful, because I could increase calories and then push them over at weigh-in time. So it could just be that we very gently increase calories and they weigh in with me daily then, so I can keep an eye on their weight. And then post weigh-in, the refuel is bigger, if you like, because they're underweight.
What sort of foods do you put on a meal plan?
Again, I try and give as much freedom as possible so people can be creative, rather than it feel like people are eating chicken, rice and broccoli every day. That's absolutely not what I ask people to do. People can choose their own proteins, they can choose their own carbs. I'll just tell them the weights of each protein, each carb, making sure that there's veggies in there as well, that there are fats for hormonal balance and things like that. So it is really varied. It's just making sure that they're getting the right amount of protein to repair and grow muscle, the right amount of carbs for energy, and then fats for just overall health.
Is there sort of a maximum amount of messages you give clients, or is it just a free-for-all? Is it just
a free-for-all? Yeah, I don't put any, I don't tie anybody in for a minimum term. There's no maximum messages. I like it to just be, I don't enjoy the transactional nature of coach and client. I would rather it be very free-flowing and feel very natural. So no, there's no sort of maximum or anything like that at all.
Do you ever feel proud of your clients?
Exceptionally proud. Whether it is someone that wants to lose a significant amount of weight, or someone that has been chasing a certain total in a powerlifting comp, the feeling of pride is overwhelming. And I would say that's number one why the job never gets boring. Because, like I say, whether it's getting the total that they've wanted in a competition or improving their relationship with food, it's a really overwhelming, nice feeling.
Just for the last question, could you lower your leg, please?
Lower my leg, yeah. Keep the laptop open, or?
No, it is. And one last final question. Do you have any regrets over the past few years?
Any regrets? There are things that I've done wrong, and, you know, I have let some clients down in the past. There has been, you know, the odd client that hasn't made weight, and that is absolutely devastating when that happens. And I wish I could have done things differently in the lead up to that competition. But I think, you know, we have to make mistakes to improve. You know, so when those things have gone wrong, I've made sure they've not happened again. Yeah, I would say just there are things that I've done wrong for clients, you know, where I've just taken my eye off the ball. We're all human, we all make mistakes, but I like to think that I've learned from them.
Yeah, just one final question. What is 3 things that you've learned that you would say to an up-and-coming either powerlifter or a nutrition coach?
If it was to a powerlifter, I would say one thing: listen to your coaches. You literally pay these people to tell you what to do to improve and be your best. So don't deviate. So listen to your coach would be the number one thing. If it was to an up-and-coming nutrition coach, it would be and this is what it's been for me: focus on the people and not the business. I don't see what I do as a business. I'm very fortunate that, yes, it happens to pay my bills, but do it for the right reasons. Do it because you genuinely want to help people.